Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Continuing on our theme of last week of kind of delving into some philosophical classics, this week I read The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Now, a little while ago, I read The Stranger by Albert Camus, one of his novels, his first novel, I believe, and I didn't like it at all. It was not my sort of thing. I found it kind of pointless and full of unlikable people, and I guess I didn't really understand what he was trying to say, or I didn't agree with what he was trying to say, which I think is basically that, this kind of alienated individual who's has no ties to the morality of his time or ties to the social mores and norms of his time, and how it's difficult for a person to live in that situation. Anyway, I didn't respond to it. I didn't like it. But one of my favorite public intellectuals is Michael Malice, who's an anarchist thinker who's been on a lot of shows lately, and he talks a lot about how Camus is one of his favorite philosophers, and he says he doesn't like the novels of Camus, but he likes the philosophy of Camus. So I saw this in a bookstore, and I want to just say I really love these editions. This is Alfred Knopf vintage editions, and all the Camus books have these lovely black and white covers that are sort of modernist looking. I really like them. But I saw this and I thought I'd pick it up because it is slim, and it's a book I've heard him talk about, and I thought it sounded like the kind of thing I would like. It's a very short book, and the message of the book is something I wholeheartedly agree with. And the message of the book is essentially, life is absurd, and life is kind of fundamentally meaningless, and yet life is worth living. Life is something that we should pursue joyfully and gleefully and find our own meaning in it, even though it has no kind of intrinsic meaning. Basically, the problem he's setting out to solve is, how do you justify life without appeal to a higher authority, without appeal to some sort of a moral arbiter as a god or a creator or someone who has a destiny for you or a purpose, or even some kind of impersonal force of destiny or purpose or meaning, the search for meaning in life. If you don't appeal to an exterior force, how do you justify that life is worth living? And he concludes that life is worth living, but it's not because of an exterior force. It's because it is what we make of it, and we can take pleasure in even meaningless and repetitive toil. And he uses the myth of Sisyphus as a metaphor for this. Sisyphus, of course, being the person who was punished by the Greek gods, and his doom is to have to roll a boulder up a hill eternally, and as soon as he gets to the top of the hill, it rolls back down to the bottom, and he has to do that over and over again. And the obvious interpretation of that myth is that it is torture and torment, because he's continually having to labor, and there's ultimately no point to his labor. It's just going to reset again and again, and he's not going to accomplish anything, and he has to do it. But Camus takes a different view on that, and he sees it as somewhat liberating and freeing, because he doesn't have to worry about anything else. He can just focus on his task, he can do the task to the best of his ability, and he can take pleasure in all the other things in life, and that in doing a good job for its own sake. I think that's a good message, and I think I basically agree with it. I don't really subscribe to a view of destiny, or a view of a moral arbiter, or a view of a cosmic judge who has a purpose designed for us. Not something I really believe in. So the absurdity of life is something that I can accept, but I certainly think life is worth living and life is wonderful, because it's a little bit of an odd question to me. It's something I've always kind of struggled with. I've heard people talk about, what's the point of life? What's the meaning of life? What's the point of life? And to me, it's sort of self-evident. Like, there's cats, and there's the moon over the ocean, and there's music, there's Mozart, and there's beer and cheese. Like, isn't that enough? That's amazing. Like, to me, I always think of this little thought experiment. If you just popped into existence in a featureless white room, and you were told that you were going to exist for 10 minutes, and then you were going to wink out of existence forever, and there was no point to any of it, but during that 10 minutes you got to play with a kitten, that would be amazing. That would be great. Like, who would complain about that? That'd be a fantastic way to spend 10 minutes. So I don't really understand the existentialist's kind of need for this question, and this need for meaning, because to me, it's evident that there's a million pleasurable, wonderful things to experience in the world and enjoy while you're here. So what's the problem? I don't really get it. But anyway, for people who do struggle with that, I think this is a pretty good book. Now, I will say, I do have a problem with Camus' writing style. I don't find him particularly enjoyable to read, although I agree with his conclusion. This is, as I said, quite a short book. It's like 150 pages long. The first 50 or so pages is basically dedicated to rehashing works of other philosophers and citing what other people have said about life. And the vast majority of the book is devoted to demonstrating that life is absurd and without meaning, and trying to make that point. The just basic pointlessness and meaninglessness and absurdity of life is demonstrated over and over again in this sort of circuitous, roundabout way that makes reference to a lot of previous philosophers, some of whom I've read and some of whom I haven't read. But to me, I was like not that interested in that. I was more interested in the argument following that demonstration, which is even though life is meaningless, how do you find meaning in it? And that's mostly done in the last like 20 or 30 pages of the book. And so I found myself kind of rushing through the first half of the book or the first 2/3 of the book to get to the point, because to me it was a lot of waffle about nothing. And then finally there's a little essay at the end called The Myth of Sisyphus that sort of sums up the entire argument. And to me that was by far the most enjoyable part of the book. So this kind of ties in a little bit to the Marcus Aurelius I read last week, where I talked about how he says, well, you shouldn't sweat the small stuff because we're all going to die soon anyway, and you should just focus on yourself and trying to live as good and honorable and respectable a life as you can, and try to do a good job and treat other people with dignity and treat yourself with dignity, and be true to your word and take pride in your work. I think all that is great messaging. So I did enjoy The Myth of Sisyphus for its message, and for, I think, it's insight into what life is like and what we can do to make the most out of life and enjoy it. Although I am not a fan at all of Camus' writing style. Maybe this is a French thing. Maybe it has to do with the translation, because he is writing in French and this is translated into English. But to me, it just goes around in circles a lot, and he takes forever to get to his point. I feel like this 150-page book could have been 50 pages and been just as insightful. I didn't get a lot out of the first bit of it, but I enjoyed it. And so this is quite a short video, I suppose. I don't have too much more to say about it. It really doesn't have much more of a point than that. But I do think it's an excellent point, and I do think that we should, take seriously our lives and not waste them while we're here. I often hear people say, Christians will often say things like, well, if there's no afterlife, then like, what's the point of life at all? There's no point if there's no afterlife. And to me, that's an insane thing to say, because to me, the absence of an afterlife is if there is such an absence. And I, of course, have no idea whether there is or not. But if it is, in fact, true that there is no afterlife, and this is the only life we have, then, of course, you want to make the most of it and enjoy it while you're here and do the best you can, because you don't get another chance. So I never really understood that proposition that, if there's no afterlife, life is pointless and has no meaning. There's a lot to enjoy in life, and you should go out there and enjoy it. Next week, I will not be doing a philosophy book. I'll be getting back to fiction. So if you have not enjoyed the philosophy, don't worry. There'll be more fiction coming for you. And if you have enjoyed the philosophy, please recommend other titles that I might read down in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and check back every Wednesday for another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. I also have a couple of ideas for videos about movies and music, which I'll be doing soon. On off days, I will continue my regular Wednesday uploads, book reviews, but there may be a few bonus videos about music and movies coming up. I have ideas that are spinning around in my head, and I will get to those soon. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you next time.